Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning for our session with Ross. My name is Dr. Reynolds. I'm the principal of the middle school. It's wonderful to see parents coming today to hear this message, this session. So today we are welcoming back Ross Addison. If you were here with us last year, he's done parent sessions with us last year. He's done student sessions with us last year. And so he's back again. And I want to thank Ms. Mira, who has coordinated this parent session today. And then there are some other parent sessions that she's coordinated with Ross throughout the school year. So Ross Addison is a child and adolescent psychologist from the UK who works with 7 to 21-year-olds experiencing a range of different challenges. The ranges include anxiety, worries, low mood, depression, ADHD, ASD, body image and eating concerns, as well as bullying, self-esteem, and confidence. He supports young people to get back on track and problem-solve concerns in their life. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, in addition to this session, he will be on campus again next week, and it'll be to talk to the middle school students about the topic that he's going to talk with you about today. So it's a really nice thing. You get to hear the message, and then we're bringing him back so our students can hear a similar message. So at this time, please help me welcome Ross Addison.
Thank you very much. So I've delivered this talk a couple of times already this week to different schools, to students and to parents. And one of the things that I would mention is that the young people seem to have really got it. When I'm talking about bullying and how bullying has increased over the past couple of years, the nature of how bullying has changed, all the children were so interactive in the sessions. So I'm hoping today some of the information that I give you will maybe even open up some dialogue between you and your children. How you can speak about bullying, self-esteem, confidence. Resilience is, I suppose, a bit of a buzzword in psychology at the moment. And I'm going to talk you through a little bit today about how you can help foster resilience in your child as well. So bullying, I think, a lot of young people now talk about that they're bullied or say that they're bullied. One of the notions I like to try and explain is that, not all teasing is actually bullying. There's some separation to it. You'll hear young people nowadays talking about roasting as well. So actually the word bullying has changed quite considerably over the years. But a lot of young people now are feeling like they're being bullied and talking about being bullied. And I would say that probably largely relates to the fact that there's just a lot more bullying going on in the world. Up until 15, 20 years ago or longer, bullying was largely physical or verbal. It would happen in person, face to face. Nowadays, there's been a huge shift, and you can probably guess it relates to cyberbullying online. And when I asked a group of young people yesterday, what do they think is the app where bullying is being mostly reported? Would you have any ideas on which social media app is the most frequent for bullying? Snapchat? Yeah, it is Snapchat. And the reason why? Why Snapchat? Yep, exactly. The messages disappear, they can't be tracked, they can't be recorded. Unless you screenshot them, they disappear completely. So Snapchat is one of the forums where it's really occurring. But bullying is not just being rude or being mean. There has to be this deliberate intent. There has to be repetition, there has to be consistent, it has to be over a certain period of time for it to be considered bullying as such. But what I always explain to young people when I'm doing this talk is that even one comment from someone can really hit deep and really hurt. So if someone has, I suppose, somewhat low self-esteem or low confidence already, if they receive negative comments, it can very easily hit them hard and really have an impact on their emotional well-being. The different types, you would have heard about these, of course, the physical side, the verbal bullying, emotional bullying, so rejecting, extorting, humiliating, blackmailing, manipulating friendships, isolating others, making people act in certain ways because of peer pressure, social and relational bullying. Sometimes we hear this in terms of aggression, damaging someone's reputation. And then cyber and social media, which I'm probably going to focus a bit more on than the other types of bullying today, and talk you through a little bit about the kind of mental health concerns I see that come about from bullying, and in particular social media and cyber. The implications, we know that it's being seriously underestimated at the moment. In the past 3 months, when the study was conducted that I've reviewed, in the 3 months preceding that report being completed, about 90% of young people aged 10 to 14 reported that they'd been bullied at least once in the last 3 months, and they reported it was all happening over the internet. So not just Snapchat, it was happening on Discord, it was happening on TikTok, much less Facebook and Instagram, because young people seem to spend too much time on those sites. But there's a lot of social media apps out there now that are really, really opening up the world for young people to be bullied on. These are the types of words young people use with me when they talk about being bullied. Some of them won't be a surprise at all. In fact, probably all of them will not be a surprise. Lots of frustration. There's a lot of research that's coming out now about ADHD and perhaps how it's being misdiagnosed. So, previously we'd always thought that if you complete a psychoeducational assessment and it indicates that there's ADHD, that must be that there's ADHD. But sometimes the psycho assessments don't take into account environmental factors, environmental traumas, what life has been like. And if you can imagine, if someone's being bullied, most likely they're going to have so many other things on their mind, they're probably not going to be able to focus that much in class. They probably are going to isolate a little bit. And you're probably going to find that they're going to be quite angry and irritable. So that doesn't mean to say that all ADHD assessments have been misdiagnosed, but some of them, it seems to be appearing that because the rates of ADHD diagnosis have really, really increased, it feels like there's quite a lot of them that are perhaps, I suppose, somewhat questionable in terms of diagnosis, worldwide as well. So I think for me, there's so many potential implications that come about from cyberbullying in terms of how it affects our well-being, that it can just spiral into lots of other different types of presentations and concerns. Not just social anxiety, but I'd probably say that in terms of anxiety, so you may be aware that there's separation anxiety, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, and OCD. That's pretty much that anxiety cluster that we have in the manuals in terms of being able to look at the criteria and to potentially give a diagnosis. So really only 5 types. And up until about 3 or 4 years ago, I would say there was a pretty fair split in terms of the types of anxiety referrals I would receive from schools or professionals. But now, when I receive a referral for anxiety and we do the assessment and we go through some criteria, I'd say more than 50% are based on social anxiety, which is just such a huge, huge spike compared to how it used to be. In fact, probably in the last year and a half, or maybe even 2 years, I haven't seen a child for panic attacks. Panic disorder, in terms of the manual, I haven't seen them. It may be that I'm not being referred those clients, but I used to be, so it feels like there's just been a huge, huge shift. Whether or not there are panic symptoms, but social anxiety is taking precedence in terms of the criteria in looking at what the concerns are. That's a possibility. But even separation anxiety, again, probably up until 4 or 5 years ago, if I received a referral for a child under the age of 11, I could probably almost bank on it being based on separation anxiety. Nowadays, it doesn't seem to be. Young people, even as young as 6 or 7, maybe 8, are coming in because they've got these social anxiety traits. And social anxiety being fears related to embarrassment, humiliation, rejection, judgment. This is what I see in terms of anxiety the majority of the time now, across all ages as well. So in terms of anxiety or feeling anxious, we know that bullying is probably the biggest contributing behaviour that leads to social anxiety. When we start to look internally and start worrying about what people think of us, if we've been bullied, of course the question will come up in your mind, why me? What's wrong with me? What's going on? And when someone is bullied, of course, they're going to naturally socially isolate, withdraw themselves. They're not going to want to spend much time out on the weekends doing things. They're probably going to reduce their extracurricular activities as well. So for me, the biggest impact on bullying that I see, apart from low mood and depression, is going to be social anxiety. Again, these are examples from young people that I meet with in terms of how they react when they feel like they've been bullied. And you know, this is not just a Dubai thing that we're seeing at the moment. Bullying worldwide has gone through the roof. Again, social media being a big aspect of it. But a lot of the young people I meet with now, I would say they probably have traits of social anxiety, even if they don't meet the criteria for any kind of diagnosis. But feeling anxious about going to school, being angry and aggressive, irritable, bullying others. Some will choose to avoid social media. Others may actually end up spending more time on social media. You know, you probably would have heard that sometimes negative attention is better than no attention. So if someone feels like, you know, they don't really have any friends, they may even befriend a bully or someone who's not being very kind to them, just so they can get some kind of social interaction. Potentially developing an eating disorder. It depends. So eating disorders typically emerge as an underlying root of low self-esteem, low self-worth. So when you think about the impact of bullying and how that can affect our self-esteem and self-worth, an eating disorder or eating disorder type traits are one of the kind of conditions that can emerge afterwards from it. Substance abuse, you know, we don't tend to talk too much about this in Dubai. And you know, I won't be too specific, but it exists here. You know, not just alcohol, not just cigarettes or tobacco, but there are other substances, and you know, occasionally I get young people coming in talking about what other things they're doing. You know, you've probably heard about the synthetics that they're putting into the vapes. Have any of you heard about this? With the synthetic cannabis? No, it's actually pretty rife now, I would say. And a lot of it is coming through Snapchat. Snapchat accounts, it's quite easy to access. So one of the messages, you know, that I always say to parents in terms of when talking about social media or positive parenting practices is just to observe what your children are doing, especially the age range of 10 to 14. 10 to 14 have emerged as the highest risk of young people now to develop a mental health concern. Previously it was 17 to 24-year-olds. They still account for the highest number of reported mental health concerns, but the 10 to 14-year-old age range, they are, and have done probably since about 2012, 2013, that age range is seeing a huge spike. So whilst it's not still at the same level of number of reported cases of mental health, the trajectory is much sharper. So you'd imagine within the next 3 or 4 years, the age range of 10 to 14 will overtake the 17 to 24-year-olds in terms of reporting as well. And that age range, 10 to 14, account for the second highest rate of hospital admissions in the US for depression, self-harm or suicidal ideation. They account for the highest reported numbers of anxiety. This age range is so crucial for development, those people in those grades. And what we see is that with their accessibility to social media and to apps, it's just having a huge impact on their life. The more time they spend on there, the more at risk they are of perhaps being bullied or you know, developing a mental health concern because of what's happening on the app. And here's just some stats that I pulled up. These are, well, this is from a report back in 2014. So this is probably the most reliable numbers that I found. Some of the other numbers that I come across were perhaps a little bit less reliable from different websites. I don't know if you can read it, but 69% of young people experience bullying before their 18th birthday. 60% of people are bullied because of their appearance, which again I think probably leads into the link of eating disorders or body image type disorders. 30% said that bullying has had a huge impact on their social lives. 38% said that bullying has had a huge impact on their self-esteem. And 25% of young people have had dark thoughts because of bullying. 1 in 4. It sounds like these numbers are incredible, but actually I think they're probably underestimated. You know, given that this was a research conducted 10 years ago, I'd very much imagine the numbers have now increased. Again, a lot of the research is showing that bullying has been the onset of why some mental health concerns develop. They're the cause, they lead to social withdrawal, self-esteem difficulties, and dark thoughts. Some of these, again, may not be new information for you. Difficulties with social skills. I think COVID really hasn't helped the lives of young people either. When you factor in COVID and the amount of time that young people were spending on social media during COVID or on their devices, naturally, you know, we were in lockdown for a long time. Young people are going to get bored, they couldn't go outside, they turn to devices. And we just know that during that period of time, it's really created a setback. And I would say since COVID, so pre-2020, you know, there was always I suppose, the need for therapists in Dubai. But since then, there's been about 120 extra mental health clinics that have opened in Dubai in the last 3 years. And from me speaking to some of them, it sounds like they're all very busy as well. So it just tells you what's happening with mental health in young people at the moment. It's really, really increasing. And since about 2017, there's been about a 50% increase in referrals to external services for social and emotional support by therapists, psychologists, counsellors, whoever it may be. So we're seeing that the trend of mental health among young people is just significantly increasing all of the time. So young people will be much more, familiar with this if they've been bullied themselves. These are some of the kind of traits you should expect as parents to see if you suspect that your child is being bullied. There's some that I perhaps add to this as well in terms of tearfulness, certainly school refusal, not wanting to go in, social isolation, changes in friendship groups, or even a resistance to want to be around friends. Grades going down, changes in eating, self-harm, distractions. That probably involves going to sleep late at night time as well, wanting to stay up, wanting to avoid the next day from actually starting. And for me, when I think about bullying and I think about how to support a young person, you can't really instill resilience just by speaking to someone once or twice. Resilience is something that isn't static. Our resilience can go up and it can go down depending on the experiences we have, much like everything in life. So when thinking about trying to instill or to build resilience in a young person, I'm always thinking about self-esteem. For me, self-esteem is the crucial part. If someone has positive self-esteem, they should be able to pick themselves up if they fall down. If they don't have good self-esteem, most likely anything negative that enters into their life or that occurs in their life will probably make them decline even further, their self-esteem to go down more, which is going to make them less resilient. But what I always explain to parents, typically first or second session that I meet with them, when they're asking me about mental health and their child, and maybe they're talking about any mental health challenges that they had when they were younger or now, for me it all starts, very early on in the child's life. When we think about like core beliefs, so core beliefs would be a term that I use with young people to describe how they view themselves, how they view the world, how they view other people in their world. And it starts very early on. If you think about children who are 2 or 3 years old, they seem so and they feel so innocent, kind of fearless in many ways. But should they have a negative experience, that fear will start to develop and they have these beliefs, or these beliefs emerge that maybe strangers are dangerous, or I shouldn't spend much time with them, or that I should be good around mummy because mummy shouts. Whatever it may be, they start developing these beliefs through experiences. And the more beliefs or the more experiences they have, the more open they are to different beliefs emerging. But for me, what's really important is that when a child experiences a negative experience or a situation, the impact it can have on them if they already have a predisposition to a mental health concern, or they already have lower or somewhat low self-esteem, is really going to hit them much harder. It takes away our self-worth. Naturally, you would expect it to. If someone's calling you names, being unkind to you, isolating you from a group, it's just going to make your self-worth really go down. And as I mentioned about social anxiety, the link is very, very obvious. So resiliency, when I'm speaking to young people, I often, depending on their age range, I often describe it to them as, it's your ability to be able to not do well in something, but to keep on trying and to try and improve next time. But actually, if I was speaking to an adult or a parent about it, it would be about we need to be able to anticipate what's going to happen in life, the downside, the positives, the negatives. Make sure that it doesn't have too much impact, whatever is going on, making sure it doesn't have too much impact on our emotions, that our self-worth can remain at least neutral, and that it doesn't end up having long-term effects on us, and to be able to cope and recover. You've probably heard your children say to you that they're worried about exams or tests, like what if I fail, what if I don't do very well? A lot of young people that I meet with will feel like it's the end of the world if they don't do well in the test. They'll feel like they're disappointing themselves, their parents, their teachers, perhaps even some of their friends, if their friends are going to ask them what the grades are. So what I try and do is to help them see that, and some parents I meet with perhaps somewhat disagree with this, that failing is a really important part of life, not doing well in something. You can't be resilient if all you've ever experienced is positivity and greatness. Because at some point in your life you would expect that something negative is going to happen, and if you haven't experienced that before, you can probably expect your self-esteem is going to really reduce. It's going to go down, you're going to start questioning yourselves. So that's why I often encourage parents to try to get their kids to engage in new experiences, to try new things as constantly as possible. Some of the things they'll like, some of the things they'll not be good at. But that's fine, as long as they know it, and as long as they're able to see that, things take practice. If I want to be better at something, I have to keep on doing it. I have to go over and over. And there's some research that shows that to master something, you need about 12,000 hours, 12 to 15,000 hours. So, when I meet with a young person, they say, well, I'm not good at football. Okay, well, how many times did you, go to the practice at the academy? 3 or 4 times. Well, that's only 3 or 4 hours. That's not really a good enough amount of time to be able to say you're not going to be a good footballer. So I try to help young people and their parents to understand that, okay, repetition and things take time, but, it's really important to reflect on the things that don't go well or the negatives as well, and to be able to have a conversation about them. Because if we only focus on the positives, when a negative does happen, it's going to really, hinder the young person. So some of these traits, you'll certainly see in your kids. High frustration tolerance, so when things don't go the way that they want it to, they don't kind of explode, they don't smash up their bedroom, they're just able to vent frustration, to talk about it. Doesn't mean they can't be stressed, it doesn't mean they can't be angry about something, but they do it in, I suppose, age-appropriate ways. Maybe even it's hitting a pillow, maybe it's getting tearful, but the high frustration tolerance for me is about just being able to tolerate those negative emotions they've experienced, and to be able to, I suppose, offset them with the other positives in their life. Having self-acceptance, I would say a lot of the young people I meet with tend to carry at least some self-acceptance kind of in their belief system, but it becomes very much questioned when bullying is, when a young person is being bullied, because of course they don't feel accepted. They feel like there is something wrong with them. Having good self-belief, having a sense of humour, having good perspective on the world, the people around their world, being curious. So I suppose that's a little bit about being willing to try new things, not to shy away and just say no. Like wakeboarding, rock climbing, those types of things, to be able to say, okay, I'll have a go at it. To be able to be adaptable, so if something doesn't go the way they want it to, they're able to just say, okay, that thing's not for me, I'll move on and try something else. And meaning making, so making sense of the relationships they have, the activities they're engaged in, just feeling a sense of purpose and meaning from it. Some young people, or people with, I suppose, lower resiliency, it may have kind of all or nothing thinking patterns. So everything in my life is good or everything is bad. My friends like me or all of them hate me. Overgeneralizing, disqualifying positives and focusing on the negative. Particularly around exam time, I would say this is probably a trait that becomes more present in young people, particularly or even if they are resilient. minimizing their accomplishments or achievements. I don't know how many of you as parents hear your child or your children say to you, I got an A, or my GPA is 3.6, 3.7. I don't know as parents if you consider that to be good. Some of you yes, some of you no. But the minimizing, it's not good enough. I need to do better. How many of you as parents, if I can get a show of hands, would be quite happy if your child was getting a GPA of 3.7? Most? Yeah, most. I had a young person came in yesterday with a GPA of, I think it was 3.93 or 3.94, something very similar to this, and extremely disappointed. Unless it's, I thought 4.0 was the highest, but this young person said unless I get at least a 4.06, I'm sure it's a 4.06, I consider it a fail. And this was someone in grade 9, I think, grade 9 or grade 10. So the expectations of that young person are extremely high, which I think is not an anomaly for Dubai in particular. I think because of the way the school system is set up here, that most schools are private. As parents, you probably have expectations. Students have expectations. Teachers will have certain expectations, and they'll have to meet they will want to be meeting the expectations of the school. So there's a lot of pressure on young people, particularly around academics. A lot of young people that come to me, unless they're almost getting perfect scores, there's probably some level of disappointment. And particularly if they've done badly in an exam, that's something that certainly will make them feel like their self-esteem is reduced. Using should, must, or ought statements, so I must do better, I should be better than this, and you'll often hear that someone who is perhaps lacking a little bit of resiliency will often be saying, I need to be better, I should be better, I ought to be better. That word better will probably frequently appear, or I need to be good enough. And young people who are perhaps not as resilient as others, naturally they're not going to think they're good enough, regardless of what they do. But the good enough aspect is always something that I focus on with young people, because good enough for what? Like, what is good enough? And actually, when we dig into the statements and the thoughts that they have, they're a little bit more willing to change some of their thinking patterns. So whilst they might have originally thought, I'm not good enough, by the end of a couple of sessions and we challenge that belief, they might start being able to say, well, I'm good at some things. Catastrophizing, so that's a little bit like panicking, I suppose. Catastrophizing that, they've not got good grades, they're not going to be going to university. The number of young people that I speak to now, even 12, 13, 14-year-olds who are thinking about college applications, what they need to be doing externally to make sure that they can get into the college that they want to, has massively increased over the last few years as well. Probably over the last 10 years, I would say. But I don't remember as a 12-year-old thinking about college applications. Or, I don't even think I was remembering or thinking about what it is I want to study. I think I was just too busy playing outside, having fun, to think about it. But now, it's the case of, where we are, we can't really do too much about it in the immediate anyway. Young people, younger and younger, are often thinking about what they're going to do next in their lives. And probably, of the young people I meet with anxiety, probably 10 or 15% are thinking, or at least some of the anxiety is coming from college, or what they're going to do in the future. There seems to be a pressure on young people to know what they want to do, or to start thinking about it now. But, I think it's really hard to ask a 12 or 13-year-old what they want to do for the rest of their lives, because I think there's a lot of adults that probably question what they want to do with the rest of their lives as well. Yeah, predicting the worst, particularly around exams. Again, this is often very, very common. So psychosocial and behavioural factors. Some of these will include having positive self-regard, so being able to talk kindly to oneself, positive internal locus of control, so being or having that feeling that you have control over things that go on in your life, whether or not it's the friendships that you have, or what you're going to do at the weekend, or how you feel, or how other people make you feel. It's this sense of control. Having good self-care, positive support networks, good social connections, the ability to face fears. Doesn't have to be face them without anxiety, but to be able to face them even if they have some anxiety, so they're willing to have a go. To see the world through an optimistic lens. Doesn't have to be constant, doesn't have to be 100% of the time, but to be able to see the world with optimism is a really, really protective factor for resiliency. And recognising the right thing to do, whether it's stepping in and helping a friend who's being bullied, or whether it's, looking after baby brother or baby sister while mum is doing the cooking, or whatever it may be, but it's making positive choices. Some of the behavioural traits or behavioural factors you'll see: assertiveness, being able to self-reflect, being able to look a bit more intrinsically about what's going on in their life, and the impact of any of those aspects of their life. Developing goals, again, depending on the age of your child, goals can be more or less helpful. I would say for 14 years and upwards, having some goals, probably short term as opposed to focusing too much on the long term, but having short-term goals can be a really, really effective way to help them achieve. Whenever I'm developing goals with parents that they want to instill in their child or to try and achieve, I always keep them really quick, brief, small to start with, and build them up as the child becomes more confident. I think it's really hard on a young person when they have a goal or a set of goals that they just feel like they're constantly not achieving. It's not good for confidence, it can be counterproductive. So having goals that are really achievable can really help a child just develop resiliency, more confidence, and more positive self-regard. Work-life balance, this particularly I would say for 16 and up is really quite hard. 16 to 18-year-olds having a work-life balance, depending on the school curriculum. I've got a few young people I work with in the American curriculum. 16, 17-year-olds would say they just can't sleep at 10 o'clock. They've got too much to do. They don't have enough hours in the day to get all of their work done if they're to sleep at 10 o'clock. And that doesn't so much include the fun parts of their life as well. But then, when looking into it a little bit more and we check screen time, we'll often see that there's kind of 6 hours a day on the phone or on Snapchat or something. So just making sure that there's a balance in the lifestyle. I'm certainly not against social media or screens, but I just think everything in moderation is a much healthier way to approach life. The World Health Organization kind of changed their view a little bit on screen use and what they'd recommend since COVID. Pre-COVID, it was about 12 hours in total they were recommending for people under the age of 18. But because of COVID, a lot of schools now implemented, or really implemented iPads and laptops to be used at school. I think DAA was one of the schools that had that in place before COVID as a part of kind of integrating learning and making it more streamlined for young people. But a lot of schools now, they kind of mandate you must be bringing in an iPad or a laptop. So the World Health Organization have said, okay, it's no longer 12 hours. If you're to factor in the amount of time young people may spend on it in school doing work, but they say 18 hours. 18 hours including school-based work. So they're still saying about 12 hours for young people when it's just social interactions, which is less than 2 hours a day. And I think you'll probably be quite hard-pressed to find anyone above the age of 14 to 18 who uses their phone or a device or a screen socially for less than 2 hours a day. So maybe it's not realistic from the World Health Organization, but just having moderation and a good balance in the lifestyle is a really good way to help young people be resilient. Asking for help, someone with somewhat low self-esteem, perhaps not too resilient, just won't ask. I'm a big believer that asking for help is a really, really good trait to have. And I'd probably say up until maybe about 8 or 9 years ago, I never asked for help. Even if I was really struggling, I just kind of kept it to myself and tried to work through it. It was probably a little bit, or somewhat a little bit of a competitive trait that I had, that I just wanted to do it myself. But now, as and when I need to, I ask for help, and I would say I was really surprised about the outcome. There's a lot of research that says if you ask very specifically, can you help me please, people are much more inclined to say yes, as opposed to saying, I need help with something. But if you finish the sentence, whatever you're talking about, and it's, can you help me please, people will generally say yes, they're much more likely to. So I try and encourage young people to ask for help, certainly from their parents, from their friends, but it depends what the help is. That might make them a little bit more ambivalent to it. If it's mental health related, they're probably not going to want to talk to their friends about it too much, and probably won't ask for help from their parents either, not unless the problem becomes, so big that they might need external support. And lifestyle choices. So these, I would say, are some of the most important, essential kind of traits we need to instill in our lives to have a chance at having really good emotional well-being. So being hydrated, I don't know how many of you probably drink 3 litres of water a day. It actually sounds like quite a lot, but most people don't. So we walk around with reduced focus, increased irritability. It's going to affect our sleep, our lethargy, it's going to reduce motivation. So I always encourage young people, particularly if they're exercising, 3 litres of water a day. Sunlight, 65 or 60%, 66% of Dubai is vitamin D deficient. So unless you take supplements, again, motivation, negative thoughts. Whenever we're a little bit low in mood, negative thoughts tend to come on much more and more. We only need about 10 minutes a day of direct sunlight on our skin, and it can just be t-shirt down or shorts down. But if we get 10 minutes, we should replenish our vitamin D each day. Exercise, 3 to 4 times a week, strenuous exercise, 30 to 40 minutes. Rowing, cycling, running, gym, yoga, Pilates, whatever it may be. Just making sure that exercise is in a young person's life is really crucial. Healthy diet, doesn't mean it has to be all fruit and vegetables, but just healthy and balanced. And actually, typically, and more importantly, it's about not skipping breakfast. So many young people I meet with skip. Haven't got time, they don't want to eat a banana or an apple in the car on the way to school, but making sure that breakfast is in the tummy is so important. Just because, we will all know this, when we're hungry, we get grumpy, we're more irritable, find it hard to think as clearly, confidence goes down, concentration and focus reduces. Not the kind of things you want to be happening for a young person who's going to school that has to focus and study for the whole day. And relaxation and mindfulness. Lots of young people probably won't want to engage in breathing exercises if you tried. Whenever I try to recommend it, they often will say, breathing won't help me. I don't need to do this, I'm not going to do mindful colouring. I don't want to do guided meditation from YouTube, the voice of the person sounds weird, or they say something to me like this. So it's about finding a relaxation exercise that works for them. Whether it's Lego, whether it's drawing, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's listening to an instrument, whether it's going for a walk, whatever it may be, when thinking about how to build resilience, we're looking for, okay, what are the optimal traits we need to put in place to enable someone to have good experiences? Because I think you'd probably agree that if we're in a bad mood, we're far more likely to have a bad experience that day, or to perceive we've had a bad experience than a good experience. So whilst you can't turn resiliency on and off like a switch, making sure that there are practices in place that really guide and support a young person to have good experiences is one of the best, I suppose, long-term goals and long-term traits of increasing or improving resiliency. Sleep, of course, is crucial. I mentioned earlier that lots of young people probably don't sleep before 10 o'clock, or say that they can't because they haven't got time. A young person, typically 8 to 9 hours sleep is really critical, especially around exam periods. But again, you'll know this as parents, trying to force your child to go to sleep at 9 or 10 o'clock, may not happen, may even cause conflict. But it's, again, just about healthy habits, trying to improve these healthy habits. So I suppose these are more for young people, and I'm happy to send the slides around to Miss Mira, who can share them if you wanted to look over them again. But for young people, these are some of the types of exercises or traits that I recommend they have a go at trying. And again, instilling these kind of positive habits, breathing, meditating, keeping your hand on your heart, having a physical connection. When we're feeling a bit down, these are some of the traits that come up as being the most effective. Going for a walk or spending a little bit of time, with a loved one or with a friend. Something I typically, probably in the first session or second session with a young person, if we're exploring or thinking about self-esteem and self-worth, I'm always thinking about, okay, well, are you able to talk kindly about yourself? Can you tell me some things about you that you consider to be positive? And with some people it's reasonably easy, but some young people I meet with will just kind of go silent. Like, well, I don't think there is anything good about me. But if you dig deep enough and you look hard enough, you'll find that there's a list. They will have it. So something I asked them to do with me is to create this list, even if it's somewhat of a short list, of things that they like about themselves, things that they think are positive, things that other people like about them. Write it down and stick it behind their door, so that every time they open and close their door, they get to see this list and it goes through their mind. It's a really, really quick and effective way of just boosting self-esteem, because if someone is not thinking so much about the positive or the highlights in their life, they're probably leaning more towards the neutral or the negative side of their life. In terms of supporting as a parent, encouraging young people to do things outside of their comfort zone, so new experiences, keeping good general health, develop connections, with family as well. Sometimes in Dubai, we're here as an immediate family, but we don't really have too much access face-to-face to the external or the extended side of our family. So making sure that they have connections with their cousins, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces, whoever it may be, is a really nice way for them to feel like they're not alone, or that they've got a wider network around them. Keeping or maintaining positive attitudes, practicing gratefulness, living in the present. That means being able to reflect on your day, to talk about it, and to express the good and the bad that came from it. Avoiding worrying about things out of your control. Yeah, this is something that I suppose I try to live by as a little bit of a motto or an ethos. Easier said than done. But young people, when I talk with them about this, they're able to let some things go. After speaking a little bit about tests or exams, and young people that worry after a test about how I did I get the answers wrong? My friend told me this was the answer, so, and then worries start to spiral. We often have a little bit of a talk about it, and they agree and decide that, okay, well, the exam is done, there's nothing I can do about it. I might as well just move on and stop worrying. So this ability just to push things to the side that can't be changed, leave them in the past, and just move on. The calming activities, really, really important for sure. I know that my child for sure doesn't do enough calming activities. Enough activities that are not stimulating and instead just serve the purpose of relaxation. The world around us is far more stimulated than it used to be. At home, we try to keep the TV off as much as possible. It goes on only when it absolutely has to, because otherwise there's always a sound in the background, there's always something on the screen, it's always engaging the mind. So any calming activities that you can encourage in your child or your young person is going to be really, really important for their well-being. Try to encourage, if you can, 10 to 15 minutes a day. The school days are pretty long, tiring, lots of work, high stress, high pressure. Anything your child can do just to relax their brain is going to be really, really helpful. And I would say, some young people say to me, oh, I don't need to sleep earlier because when I sleep I'm relaxing. Well, not if you're worrying, and not if you're having these dreams that are making you worry. So for me, sleeping isn't really a relaxation exercise, it's just something we do because we have to, because we're tired. being able to name feelings. This is actually, I would say, a little bit more difficult than perhaps people would think just by reading it. Being able to identify and name them. You know, there's such a wide range of feelings out there that a lot of the time we just focus on the most common ones. You know, anger, frustration, happiness, sadness. They're probably the four that we gravitate most towards. But being able to talk about how we felt throughout the day, not just in words, but being able to put it into a dialogue, creates a little bit of a story of our day. And when we have that story, it puts things into context. You know, I felt a little bit down today because one of my friends said this to me. And what I'd like to do is speak to that friend about what they said and see if we can, you know, talk a little bit about it. So it's always about talking and feelings, being able to name them and to talk about them is really, really important. And for a young person who's pretty resilient, you would hope that they would be able to validate their own feelings as well. So I feel bad today because, and that's okay. And praising success, I think most parents do this really well. You know, praising success, praising your child when they've done something well. It's a really, you know, I hear it from parents all the time, but sometimes young people still feel that they don't hear it. You know, some young people will say to me, yeah, I don't feel like I get any praise. You know, not from teachers, not from friends, not from parents. And then I speak to parents, they come into the room and they tell me, you know, when they praise just even today. So sometimes, you know, your child may not even hear the praise. Depends how you say it, perhaps. But just making sure that they've understood it and validated it is really, really important. One-to-one family time. Again, this isn't that easy in Dubai. It's somewhat tricky to get, especially if you've got more than one child. You know, many of us are working parents, so getting that family time is quite difficult. Breakfast on the weekend, lunch on the weekend, dinner at night time, some of the times where you can certainly get the family time. I mentioned earlier that making sure that they know that failing is a normal part of life is really, really important. You know, some parents don't like the idea of their child saying that failing is okay, but there's a difference between saying failing is okay and failing is a normal part of life. Maybe you don't feel that failing is okay, but it's going to happen. So it's more important about, okay, what do we do when we fail? How should we respond? That's where the harnessing of resiliency really comes out. And I put this down because it's what a lot of young people say to me. If I don't do well, my parents put me down and they make me feel small, or they make me feel like I've done something really wrong. Most of the time it's a misperception. So that's not actually what the parents have said or done, but the child internalizes it that way. So when speaking about things that haven't gone well, tests, exams, you know, assignments, any type of schoolwork or homework, avoid the confrontation about it and instead focus the conversation very much on, okay, what can we do better next time together? This is where they accept and hear that you have found that, or feel that they haven't quite met the standard that they could for themselves or that you expect as parents, but you're in it with them and you're going to help them through it. Okay, I think just on time. We have some time for questions. If anyone has any questions.